Shortbread biscuits. So simple, but yet so easy to mess up. With only 3 ingredients, flour, butter and sugar, the method here is key. So today I'll show you how to make the best shortbread biscuits by hand. But before we start, let's clean down our work surface. And on to the equipment that you'll need. You'll need a tray lined with parchment paper, a dough scraper, a rolling pin, although this looks a bit skinny, so I might use this bottle later on, we'll see. We also need a biscuit cutter. Here you can use whatever you like. I have this little fluted one. Now if you don't have a cutter, you can use the lid of a jar, or even a glass like this, but be careful because glass may break. And as always, you'll need digital scale to weigh all your ingredients. Now on to the ingredients. I'm using 300 grams of white flour, 200 grams of softened butter, and 100 grams of caster sugar. And you would always use this ratio for biscuits. 3 parts flour, 2 parts butter, 1 part sugar. And make sure your butter is soft, not melted. We'll also need a little bit more sugar for sprinkling at the end. Right, when it comes to the sugar in the biscuits themselves, make sure you use caster sugar, because it will be much easier to whip it up with the butter. If you use something grainy like this unrefined cane sugar, you'll have a hard time mixing it. Right, before we start, let me quickly explain to you why it's called a shortbread and what shortening, in this case the butter, will do to our flour. If you imagine the flour is made up of tiny little particles, individual little pieces of ground up wheat basically, which contain proteins called glutenin and gliadin. And when you introduce water to the mix, this will create gluten. Long stringy strands of elastic gluten, and long is the word. That's why shortbread opposed to gluten is short. We don't want this, basically. This is bread. Now if we add butter to the mix instead of water, the fat in the butter will coat the individual particles of flour, thus preventing any gluten formation. So, the gluten strands will be short. And that is why shortening is called shortening, because you are shortening the gluten strands. And that's your biscuit. So with that out of the way, we can start making our biscuits. Now this will be quite messy, but don't be shy, get your hands dirty. What we need to try and achieve here is to cream the butter and the sugar together. And you'll see as we go along, it will get nice and fluffy. So just start by spreading the butter all over your table. And obviously, if you have the luxury of owning a mixer, just pop your butter and your sugar in your mixing bowl, attach the paddle attachment and just whisk away. But I will show you how to do it the hard way. So once you've spread your butter out, just sprinkle all of your sugar over it. And we'll start working it in. Now crack a tin of elbow grease and get stuck in. This will be a bit of a workout. You want to start slowly by mixing it together. You don't want any sugar flying around your kitchen, So the reason why we are creaming the butter and the sugar together is to dissolve the sugar, because butter contains water, and also while you're dissolving the sugar and whipping up with the butter, it will create little air pockets in the mix. And once you add the flour, and when we're ready to bake it, those air pockets will expand a little bit and it will make the biscuit nice and fluffy. Now I'm not gonna lie, this isn't easy, and if you need to take a break every couple of minutes, then please do, because this will take around 10 minutes of vigorous scraping. And vigorous is the word here, because you really want to cream it together. So once you feel like your arm is numb and you've lost some weight maybe, check the mix by running your finger through it and checking for any large pieces of sugar. This feels just about done now. So once it's nice and fluffy, spread it out all over the table, and we'll add our flour. No special techniques here, just sprinkle it all over and feel happy about that you don't have to whisk the butter anymore. And now using your scraper, just as we did with the sugar before, scrape it all together and turn it into one mass. Not going too fast, of course, you don't want to make a mess. As if this wasn't messy enough. Make sure you do this with a light hand. And what I mean by that is you should crumble this mix together. Don't knead it like a bread dough, because butter still contains water, and by kneading it and handling it too roughly, we might still induce some gluten formation, and we don't want that. We want our biscuits to be nice and light and crumbly. And at this point, it may actually look even too crumbly, but don't worry, it will come together. So just scrape it all together, and instead of kneading it, we will press it into one piece. Collect it into a nice little ball, ready for rolling. So to roll out your biscuits, dust your work surface quite generously with flour, but you don't want too much because we don't want to add any flour to the recipe. We just want to prevent the dough from sticking to the table. So still keeping with the idea of handling the dough quite gently, grab our rolling pin, realize that it's way too skinny for the job, still cling on to the hope that this may work, but obviously it won't. So, let's continue with the bottle. I mean, who needs a rolling pin anyway? This works perfectly. You want to roll these out to about ½ inch thick. That's about 12 millimeters. It may feel really crumbly and loose, but that's how you want it. Once in a while I like to smooth out the edges so they're not crumbling away like that. And once you're done, just lastly smooth out the top. And that's it, we're ready to cut our biscuits. Get your tray lined with parchment paper, otherwise they'll stick. And cut away. Try to maximize your yield from every single sheet of dough, because once you re-roll the leftovers to make more biscuits, you will not get the same quality. The first batch, the first layer will always be the best. Now they shouldn't spread out too much whilst baking, but I would suggest to leave about an inch in between each biscuit, just in case they do. Now to help them keep their shape, we'll chill them for 30 minutes in the fridge and make them set properly. This should prevent them from spreading out whilst baking. At this point we can preheat our oven to 150 degrees Celsius without fan. This is very important. And while I'm waiting for the first batch to set, I'll just roll out the leftovers. Alright, so 30 minutes later, we can see that our biscuits have set nicely. Before you wouldn't be able to pick them up and handle them like this, they would just crumble to pieces. And now we are ready to bake them. So just stick them in your oven on the bottom shelf, 30 minutes, 150 degrees, no fan. They must not color too much, you want them to be nice and pale. So it's been 30 minutes, they look about right. As you can see, they have kept their shape, they're still nice and light in color. They should also feel nice and light when you pick them up. So now there's only one more thing we need to do whilst they're still hot. Sprinkle them generously with some caster sugar. Don't worry about putting too much because you'll shake it off later on anyway. But you do want to do this while they're still hot because the sugar will stick to them better. Alright, so that's the biscuit. If you got any questions, leave them down in the comments. Subscribe for more videos, I'll be posting every Wednesday. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.